Hello and welcome to episode 22 of The Dive. As was promised, we are live streaming this episode. Many thought it would be a live stream of a pre-recorded episode. Those people are wrong.
How do they
actually
know?
Here right now.
Do you have a newspaper? Can you prove it?
Yeah, just like a date. And time.
Yeah,
I have
exactly.
a watch, just like not digital.
I'll tell you how we can prove it. We're going to take live questions from the audience. Actually, our producers are going to. So if we don't pick your question, blame the producers. Not our fault.
Yep.
But keep sending those in over Twitter, and that's how they're going to filter them.
Yeah, so let's get started. We're going to talk about World's qualifications, the finals coming up in a lot of different regions. We want to start with LCK. Obviously, that's the one I think on a lot of people's mind.
Yeah, we have been kind of already grinding towards Worlds because the semifinals and finals have either happened or are about to happen in pretty much all the major regions. As you mentioned, LCK is one of the finals that's already finished. Longzhu, shockingly, as the number one seed, upset SKT, who everyone expected to win. But let's kind of talk about that because they also did it in a somewhat unexpected manner with Khan
I was gonna say-
carrying on top lane consistently.
You're definitely referring to Khan and the, playing carries, right? It's not just the
Yeah.
Jace either, where he's like, hey, you have to ban my Jace or you're going to get punished. But they also use Jax. Like, they use split pushing in the meta where everyone's like, it's so boring. We always need a 5-on-5. We have to play these tanks. And the only important thing is protecting our AD carry. Khan is out there getting solo kills. He's split pushing effectively. He's playing these carries. He's bullying tanks in lane. And that's definitely good to see that can still be successful. It definitely does require a higher technical level for execution.
Yeah.
But the success is undeniable. I mean, they actually finished first. Where, as you're saying, everyone's kind of in this mindset of, oh yeah, but SKT is coming for you.
And I think one of the biggest things about it is that not only does it require a lot of mechanical skill, a lot of prowess on these individual champions for the player, but it requires a team that is not only willing but able to play around that player very, very heavily, because you don't just play Jace and try to bully your lane without your whole team planning around that, right? Everyone has to be bought in. Everyone has to say, okay, he is actually going to carry us, so we'll play defensive bot lane, we'll play defensive mid lane, our jungle will play around top, and that's how we're going to succeed. Because I think that if you kind of half-ass it, if you have a Jace who's just going ham, even if you're great individually, if the bot lane is playing too aggressively, then they can get punished because your jungler needs to be topside helping out your Jace.
Yeah, and I did also think it was cool for the storylines how they beat the Peanut SKT and then they brought in the Blank SKT and they beat him too, and then it's like, bring in the Huni SKT. That's what they need to match up against Khan. And it actually worked in the first game because Huni was able to kind of outcarry him in game 3. But ultimately, I thought it was the coordination the team was able to have around topside. Like, Prey and Gorilla, I think, still fairly clearly calling the shots in that one, but so well able to manage the game from that bottom side to kind of enable the top lane carry, because players like Khan have been around in the LCK for a really long time and just kind of had a breakout split, which is also cool.
It did make me really excited, though, for any potential matchups that these guys could have in Worlds later on, because I'm left with a lot of questions, and I think a lot of people are left with the questions of, well, who does SKT bring to Worlds? What is SKT's starting 5 now? Because I think it wasn't necessarily clear. Like, I would have really liked to see a full series of Huni and Blank and see how they actually do. Obviously, game 4 was extremely tragic for Huni. He ended up down, 3 levels very early in lane, maybe even more. It was Jason and Cho'Gath, and Khan absolutely smashed him with the help of his team. They were able to camp Huni. They were able to put him behind, and that looked pretty bad. But Huni also had an incredible performance in game 3, and I think that it was interesting, listen to Pop and Smithy and the commentators talking about the fact that Huni is this more aggressive play style, and Untara is who you go to for consistency, but Huni is who you go to kind of for the aggression to actually match up against a player like this. So
Right.
I thought it would have been interesting to see.
Because they have to bring 6 players.
Yeah.
That's what we need to talk about. They
Yep.
need to designate a world sub, so they don't get to have the 7 or 10-man roster at Worlds.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are jumping on the Huni train after, this series, and they're like, oh my God, that game was amazing. The Gnar and all the outplays, and he escapes with like 10 HP or something in the, play outside the base. But they also have to remember all the reasons why Untara was starting in this series, and the reasons why Untara had been playing so much more than Huni is because throughout the summer, like, Huni was getting punished super severely.
As he did in game 4.
And they just and they wanted that
Yeah.
consistency. So again, I got super hyped up just like everybody else for the Huni game, and especially when like the camera's on him after the Nar game, and
Yeah.
he's like chewing his gum and he's all like sweating and stuff. I was like, oh my god, it's gonna be epic. Huni's back in there because he actually has so many fans worldwide that
Yeah.
it would be really good for SKT if they could actually have continued success with that. But again, you kind of have to count the reliability factor,
Exactly.
right?
And we know SKT is so much about winning and not just about fandom. Because, like, if they were about who has more fans, Hooney and Peanut would be starting every game because they're the more famous players. But I think they get more mileage out of having Untara as the stable, non-carry, reliable top laner at Worlds, and then having Peanut and Blank to be able to sub in and out. So I think that's ultimately what they're going to end up doing. Even though I think, and that's another thing, like trying to decide right now who is the better starter for this team
Mhm.
on a reliable basis. I do think it's Untara over Hooney. And I can't say the same between Peanut and Blank. Like I'm still undecided on that, and I almost feel like SKT is still undecided on that.
The interesting thing to me is if they think that Longzhu is their number one competition, they
Mhm.
may say, hey, well, Huni may be a little bit less consistent, but if they think that actually he is their best chance to win against Longzhu, and that is who they are worried about beating at Worlds,
Mhm.
maybe you actually take a hit against some of the other teams because you're saying, well, it doesn't actually matter. We're good enough that we can win with Blank or Peanut. Who cares? But when it comes down to who we think is the number one threat, much as SKT had talked about in the past with Rocks Tigers and some of their big competition going into Worlds, if they're only worried about one team, maybe they actually tailor their roster to just beat that team.
I
Yeah.
think what's important about this series is that if we go back and check the tapes, I'm already right. Longzhu is going to represent Korea at Worlds. Remember when we?
Samsung was
like
not going
weeks and weeks ago.
Yeah.
We said who was going to get knocked out, and I said Samsung. I think was going to get knocked out. which
Okay, so
still
you're
could
also
happen.
correct then.
Well,
right now you're correct.
Well,
yeah.
Samsung and KT are still yet to play in the final. Of the
He
regional
said Longzhu was
qualifier.
going to get knocked out. So he's the only
I
one.
said there was no chance.
Ooh.
I mean, I already wore the punishment cape, so it doesn't matter. To prove we are live, though, Brohan Lal had a good question. Who would you rather have in your team for Worlds 2017? And this would assume Smeb makes it. It would be Khan or Smeb. Who would you want as your Worlds top laner in that situation?
I still would say Smith.
I think experience, on that stage counts for a lot. Longzhu showed up big in the LCK finals. There was a question mark around a lot of these players. Would they be able to perform there? But I also think that the jump from your region's finals to the world stage is another really big one. And there's always going to be a question of can they actually show up and perform at that same level with all the added pressure?
Yeah, and even though Khan was like the rightful best player in the finals and is the LCK champion, and Smeb couldn't beat SKT, Khan still hasn't shown that he can play more than one style. He like brute forced the Jace Jax team play around me style to an LCK championship, but I still like the versatility out of Smeb being able to play all those different things, which still means I would rather have that guy on my team because he just fits so many more different styles.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't know what metas are really going to kind of come to be at
Mhm.
Worlds yet. That's something that's always going to be in flux. But it's also exciting to think, hey, people didn't really think that Khan's style would work in this meta. So can he actually
Yeah.
continue to force it upon, force his will upon the meta, continue to make this work, especially going into Worlds where so many people will be prepared for them? Because I think a lot of people felt that if SKT made it to the finals, they were going to win. Longzhu would fall apart, that they were exploitable, that it's this kind of more gimmicky style. Even Parth talking when he had come on about this reckless style that they play, that it wouldn't necessarily work in best of fives. And they've now proven that it will, and they've shown
Yeah.
that they're a real contender for Worlds.
I got a question for Kobe here. Do you remember Save, the top
Slightly.
laner from
I
Najin?
was going to say Najin Sword.
Yeah, the Najin. It was Najin Shield in
Shield.
2014 Worlds. That top laner. I've been trying to work on like a preliminary top 20.
God, that
players
is
at
so
Worlds
long
list.
ago.
It's so long ago, but it reminds me a little bit of Khan because Najin Sword made this crazy run through the Shield, made this crazy run through the regional qualifier in 2014, and he was playing like AD Nidalee top and smashing people, and we were like, oh man, the last carry top laner. He's so good that he can force these off meta picks to work, and he's like 13th on the top 20 players at Worlds or something, and they barely make it out of groups, and then they lose in the quarterfinals to OMG or something. And then the dude was just like never seen again. So I have to guard against that with the whole Khan versus Smeb discussion that we're like, oh man, he's so good that even his bad picks are working. It's like, there's also a little bit of variance here.
Yeah, I feel like we've used that iteration of Najin as like the cautionary tale
Yeah.
multiple times before when getting hyped up though. It feels kind of bad, but it definitely is true because that was a pretty big flop.
Quick predictions before I move on to other regions with the final coming up between Samsung and KT for the third world spot for Korea.
Mhm.
I
Gauntlet,
saw
baby.
one person on Reddit was like, KT's got this 80%. I don't think so. I think it's way closer than that.
I don't think it's 80%, but I mean, I'll stick with my original prediction. We were talking about
Mhm.
which team was going to be the odd man out. I thought it was going to be Samsung going into Worlds, and I do think that Samsung looked somewhat shaky against Africa. They didn't look that good. I think KT is a cut above, and I think that they can take it.
I would say that I think going into what is it tonight, right? Or tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
I think that they're going to start with ambition this time around rather
Mhm.
than going through the first couple games with Haru. So I think that Samsung will probably look better, but it is kind of hard to favor them against SKT because
Against KT.
I mean, against
Yeah.
KT because even like some of the standout plays, from like Juve and stuff, outplaying people on NAR as well.
Mhm.
It kind of looks hard to do that against KT, against like Smith
Yeah.
and stuff. So I'm not quite sure. Plus, I got a favor score, and I really am biased because I want him to be at Worlds.
Yeah, I give them a 70-30. The reason I don't give them is that whole they're 1-11 with games where they can clinch worlds. There is still some type of mental block when they're about to do it to be able to overcome. And Samsung's a very experienced team that is capable of reverse sweeps.
I mean, we had them in the finals last year, so it's definitely a capable team, and they still have those guys. So
Yeah, I mean, Samsung did lose both their series to KT in the regular season, but they were 2-1s. This is not a completely one-sided affair in either of the series. So I definitely do think it should be a good one. But the gauntlet in general has been really exciting, and I am
Mhm.
excited to see if there's anything else crazy coming out. I mean, Lulu Jungle coming out, a lot of pretty wacky stuff. Targons on Kog'Maw was pretty cool. So there has been some pretty interesting strategies and creative strategies that teams are kind of tailoring specifically to try to get into Worlds. So I'm excited to see if KT has actually come up with anything or if they're going to adopt any of these
Yeah.
other strategies that have been working for some of the teams.
Yeah, I hope they drop their Zach priority. I don't think that champion is good for them, but they love picking it. One thing that we want to move on to now is the LPL semifinals as well as their final. Not many people keep up with the LPL, but I do think there's some little previews we can give because they have been playing their playoffs on patch 7.16. You talk about Kog'Maw priority.
Hmm.
Holy crap, these guys have some Kog'Maw priority. Still a really weird region to follow with some of the ways the teams end up playing. But the final there is RNG, which have Uzi back. He's been out for a lot of the split with an elbow injury, but has been back for playoffs and about half of the regular season. And then EDG, who many people say had the easier side of the bracket,
Yeah.
won a 5-game series against IG. But that's a lot of the players you're used to seeing from Worlds. The only ones that have kind of left was Pawn and Deft are gone. They got this new carry called iBoy, who's like this super young AD carry, and Scout's been their mid laner. So quick preview, EDG, RNG, who do you got?
Well, first let's go over both teams because, like you said, not a lot of people like keep up with LPL. EDG coming into this, like you said, probably a little bit easier on that side. I would say for me, the two players to watch would be Scout and Mako. When we were going back and watching the semifinals, there was also like a lot of talk about iBoy because he is so new. I'm not really that sold on him being like this prodigy or something, Chinese AD carry,
Hmm.
but he is definitely decent, and he has Mako next to him in the bottom lane, who definitely has credibility, and I am behind, so I think that they have a decent shot at making it close, but I would definitely be favoring RNG because not only did Royal Never Give Up beat EDG in the cross group play or
Yep.
whatever they had before Rift Rivals, but if you're looking at those standout players as well, Xiaohu has actually stepped up in such a big way,
Right.
as well to match in the mid lane.
Yeah, I still see EDG as this team that potentially has slightly better teamwork, but I see RNG as the team with more standout players. Like, if I had to name a current best player in LPL, it would probably be Xiaohu with what he's done on RNG, especially with the difference they've had at AD carry when Uzi is or isn't in the lineup. So that's definitely a player to watch for me. And then now that they're with Uzi, they still play so much around Uzi.
Yeah.
It's literally game warping. I would almost hate to be MLXG playing with Uzi because I almost feel like he has to be bottom lane all the time.
And I think the other impressive thing about Shahu is he's actually been that good for quite a long time now. This
Mhm.
guy has been really impressive over quite a long period of time. And I do agree that they still play very heavily around Uzi. You know, watching them in the semifinals, seeing how many plays they want to make bot lane with these 5-man plays, you know, even still playing Shen, prioritizing that kind of more highly than I think some of the other regions are too, to make these global map plays, roaming down their mid lane or bringing in MLXG, making these Jarvan Shen 5-man dives on bot side to try to get Uzi ahead,
Mhm.
whether he's playing a hyper carry or whether he's not. You know, even when he's playing Ashe, they're still trying to
Got to get first
put
turret,
this
man.
put this priority on him. And I think it is really interesting because although Kog'Maw has been so crazy big in China, Uzi has not been prioritizing it as much as some of the other guys. He's still playing, you know, more 4-lane dominance, and that's always
Mm.
kind of been his signature.
Plus, even though both these teams 3-2'd to get to the finals,
Yep.
I feel like Team WE was a harder opponent
Yep.
than IG were.
Mhm.
Just because some of the mistakes that IG were making, and like felt like they were a little bit slow in macro as well, and that allowed EDG uh, a lot of ground to work with in that
Yeah.
area. So another kind of reason I think I would favor RNG
I
in the
know.
finals.
Is it Uzi's first ever
He's gonna
domestic
get it.
championship?
He's gonna get it.
Uzi was so try hard and serious about the 1v1 tournament at All Star last year. Like the whole meme around like Uzi never winning really matters for him. So like I actually hope he wins it this time because he's
It'll
been
be
so good for so long. He has to get first.
Yeah,
Second place too many times.
I mean, he is really good, and I do favor him against iBoy. I actually
Mhm.
felt like West in the EDG IG series. I felt like in a couple of the fights, West was the reason that they lost.
You mean the Kog'Maw flash?
I mean,
that
the
made
You mean
Reddit?
Kog'Maw
the
flash,
front page Reddit post of
the Kog'Maw flash, but
Yeah.
also a Tristana fight where he like flashes on top of iBoy while he's shooting someone else, and iBoy kills him. There was a number of plays, and on the other side, you know, Uzi, he's going up against Mystic, who I think Mystic maybe is even more impressive. Mystic to me has been so good. So
Mystic's been a beast.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
been pretty sick. I definitely do think I favor RNG coming into it, because I think that they took down a stronger opponent, because I think that they play very well, like around the bot lane, and I think that that has been traditionally kind of a strength for their opponents.
Yeah. Random side note: the third place match already happened in the LPL, and I just wanted to talk about a meta point here because everyone's been waiting for Yasuo to like get troll picked or picked in the meta. It actually happened, but it was at the same time as the LCK finals. Was during the IG versus WE third place match where IG ended up winning, but Rookie picked Yasuo into Lucian. So it was a lot of people have been blind picking Lucian. He's like, I got the counter pick. It's Yasuo. And apparently they were so intimidated by the Yasuo pick that they flexed Lucian bottom lane and put him against LeBlanc, which you'd think would just smash him, and he still won as Yasuo. He just smashed the game.
That's pretty sick, and it's kind of too bad that that did get overlooked. I've actually been thinking that Yasuo would come back into the meta, not necessarily for that specific counter pick, but because Gnar has been so big, right? And it
Mhm.
used to be this pick that was actually used as a counter to Gnar in the top lane, and we've been seeing Gnar be extremely popular in the meta for a while now. So it's kind of interesting to see that it actually finally come back in, and maybe the fact that it had some success there could mean we see more internationally.
Perks promised me that he would play Yasuo
Mhm.
sometime this year. It was at MSI.
Yeah.
A
He
bad
has yet to fulfill that
Yeah.
promise. So
Remember when Saint told you he was going to play like Jungle Cassidon or something back in 2013? Uh, will the LPL, this is a question from Twitter, Budgie Smuggler M, will the LPL replicate their Rift Rival success at Worlds? I actually got trolled. This is one of our writers who sent his own tweet into the Slack chat. That's his Twitter handle. So please flame him on Twitter for this.
So
one.
if by replicate Rift Rival's success, he means
Win
beat
Worlds.
Beat
Korea,
Korea.
then I will
No.
sadly predict no for that one.
They could take some games though. If that's, you know,
Yeah.
if you're looking to take some games, then yes, I can see that. But I still think that Korea is far and away the big favorites coming into Worlds, and I have seen some questions, you know, on Twitter about this. People, because of Rift Rivals, because of some of the stronger showings from other regions, you know, they're more hyped up about it, wondering, who actually are the favorites coming into Worlds. I still think it's very clearly Korea. And one question I
Yeah.
had seen that I'd be interested in your guys' thoughts is Longzhu the now the favorite coming in, or do you still favor
Ooh.
SKT?
I want to get to that right after the Rift Rivals question, only because watching the LPL LCK like celebration for Rift Rivals, they weren't that hyped, which makes me think even the LPL players that won were like, we managed to beat them. It's nice, but this by no means means we have surpassed them in any way. So I think that's just even more confirmation that LCK is still a huge favorite. SKT versus Longzhu, based on Worlds experience, I have to give SKT the favorite because they have proven that they have been able to win over a long period of time against so many different teams in so many different metas. And we know Longzhu can be good on the 7-16 meta, which will not vary that much from the 7-18 meta, but it's still a whole new ballgame as soon as you get to Worlds.
I feel like people are also going to be preparing a lot specifically for Con. And so a lot more teams are going to there's a tremendous amount of time between, that
Yeah.
teams have to prep for Worlds. And we always talk about Worlds meta developing when all the teams get together and they start practicing and stuff. So I feel like things are going to change decently. And when there's going to be a lot of change, you kind of have to go back on the reliable, history that which is SKT and would point towards, their preparation.
I want to buy into that, man.
You want to be a Longzhu fan?
I want it to be someone other than SKT who are the favorites. And the only thing that's kind of maybe has this little glimmer of hope for me is the fact that these are the same things that people were saying coming into the finals, as far as, well, Longzhu had a good season, but everyone's going to prepare for them now. Their style's kind of gimmicky. They're going to get figured out. It's a best of 5. You can target them in pick bans, no problem. They still made it work. So I have this glimmer of hope that maybe these guys are, the chosen ones who can just bring their style to the international scene, continue the success, and have that level of confidence and swagger from rookies their first time.
So,
and they also have BDD in the mid lane, Prey and Gorilla in the bot lane. Like, they do have threats all over the map. So
I was going to say, Prey and Gorilla can have that confidence, right?
Yeah.
Prey and Gorilla, even in the interviews that we watched, like the trash talk and stuff beforehand, Prey and Gorilla feel to me like they're there. They're where you want them to be. And the rookies, not so much. Like, and even BDD's like, yes, Faker, you are my idol. Yes, I'm your fan still.
I
like,
would love to one day surpass you. One day.
So I definitely feel like they're close, but I feel like they're still in the glimmer, Peter Pan stage or something over here. Is not quite favorites.
My heart's
yet.
telling me Longzhu.
All
My
right.
head's telling me SKT. All right, EULCS. Should we hop on over?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so
There were some upsets.
There were some pretty big upsets. I think a lot of people specifically were surprised about Fnatic
For sure.
going down. I think that was a really big one. This has been a team that has been really hyped up all split long, going into Rift Rivals, huge hype. Coming out of Rift Rivals, still had great success, still looking like perhaps the best team in EU. And, well, it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, they redid their strategies, but Misfits is actually playing really well. They managed to be the lowest seed in playoffs and then make a run all the way into finals. Like, in that way, it's very impressive, but you can't help but just be really disappointed with Fnatic and falling apart in like clutch situations. It's a team that has so much confidence and swagger because they're able to win so much in the regular season, but falling
swagger
apart in
talk.
rivals and then essentially falling apart again in the semifinals to now being reliant upon their world's qualification with the regional qualifiers is like another big blow in a pretty short amount of time for Fnatic.
Yeah, it is kind of rough. And speaking of falling short of expectations, I mean, H2K, right? The fact that they actually got swept by G2. Yes, it is G2 who has had success for so long.
Yeah.
I still think that people were expecting more from H2K coming into this because of their success in the regular season. And that is a team that always seems to kind of fall short when it really matters to me.
Yeah, I kind of want to stick on the Fnatic Misfits matchup for a little bit first, though, because I think that Misfits really deserve a lot of credit for that match. They had a much clearer game plan coming in than I was kind of expecting, and especially Maxlore and Power of Evil had some really standout games, which is going to be so important for them in the finals versus G2. With the way that Perks is playing right now. So it actually got me, watching that semifinal, got me pretty hyped up for the European finals to see those two kind of go at each other. Because previously to this, whenever I listen to Europe, they were always talking about Alfari for Misfits in the
Mhm.
top lane, like in spring and stuff. But then
Mhm.
they kind of stopped talking about him for summer, and he fell off a little bit, I guess they
Mhm.
said. So to have a little bit of resurgence for him, and then actually switching over to a lot of mid lane camping and being able to punish Caps, who they were talking about was like best in Europe and stuff,
Yeah.
was pretty promising.
I mean, PoE's scoreline for the series was 23 and 22. Like, that's pretty insane, right? Like, he actually had a very strong series. Another guy that I've actually been pretty impressed with on Misfits is Han Sama. Hadn't kind of bought into the hype as much with him in the past, but I do think that in recent times he's been actually very impressive. He's obviously really good mechanically. He's been top of US Challenger, I think, for quite a while
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
And
He had that sweet drive episode
he
made
did
on him
have
at
a
the start
sweet
of the
drive
season where he drew a
episode.
bunch of sweet
There you
pictures.
go.
That Zale watched
The
it. He's a
script is
fan.
complete.
But I actually think he's stepping up, and he played very well in the playoffs, and he has, to me, become much more of a legit carry threat. I think
Yeah.
that they held up and really kind of exceeded the bot lane of Fnatic too.
I do want to echo the fact, though, that Power of Evil and the team around him stepped up huge. Like,
Mhm.
they took Caps completely out of that series. In the games they won, Power of Evil didn't die. Like, and for a team that had a negative record in the regular season, that type of improvement is like pretty insane as far as turning that around.
Yeah, looking forward for them. I watched their post game interview, was pretty cool as well, because they talked about, and they kind of credited a lot of their changes to literally just being more confident. Power of
Mhm.
Evil and Hansama both were just saying, okay, I removed a lot of the doubt in my own self play, so they're playing more aggressive and more self confident. That on final stage though, that on world stage, we'll see where that holds up,
Yeah.
because when we're leading up to worlds and we have all these like regional competitions,
Mhm.
it's still hard for me to get super excited about teams that kind of make pushes towards the end
Mhm.
for the world stage, because like you talked about, Isaiah, like that step from
It's a big
even
leap.
regional finals
Yeah.
up to worlds is such a big one.
Mhm.
I definitely want to keep track of those guys though, and see if they can keep their confidence and keep the basically quick decision making that has definitely benefited them.
Yeah. No matter what happens in finals, they're in Worlds. Because they're
Mhm.
guaranteed enough championship points to get the seed, even if they lose. Jumping back to G2 versus H2K, though, one thing that isn't as surprising to me is yes, G2 was the lower seed, but if you looked at their record during the regular season, they were one loss more than H2K. So
Mhm.
in that case, it was a little closer to me, especially just because everyone has been waiting for G2 to turn it on. And H2K has that history of success. It's more, or history of failure in the semifinals.
Yeah.
So successfully making it to the third place match.
Successfully failing.
Yeah. But just with that, like, I was surprised, but not really, if that makes sense. Like, oh yeah, I thought maybe they turn it around. Clearly not. Clearly G2 is still the more experienced team
Hmm.
in these ways, and H2K just kind of melted throughout the rest of that series.
I guess to me the surprising point wasn't necessarily that G2 won the series. It was how one-sided it was, and that it was a 3-0 that H2K didn't feel like really showed signs of life even. It felt like they just got completely dominated. And that was
Yeah.
not the G2 that I was expecting coming into it, because this to me is the first split in a while that they have shown a fair bit of weakness, that they have shown that they are, fallible,
Mhm.
that they could actually be beaten. So this is more the G2 of old, right? That you
Yeah.
expected to kind of smash through everyone, to come through and dominate. And they're going to have a massive confidence boost going into the finals, plus all the experience that they have in these finals. So it'll be pretty interesting
Yeah.
to see if they can actually get back to that form going straight into Worlds, and give European fans a lot of hope coming into that tournament, because they already had success at MSI. And if they can end Europe on a high note, then I think that a lot of people would start believing the hype.
What's your prediction? We
I
got the
think
6th seed Misfits. The last time, so in NA, we've had the 6th seed make it to finals twice. Good
TSM
Game
one time,
University
right?
in 2013 lost to TSM. And then TSM is the 6th seed in spring of 2016 with the Yellow Star lineup,
Yeah.
and they lost to COG. They were one team fight away from making it.
Yeah.
Can Misfits be the 6th seed
I'm
that
gonna
gets to pool 1 at Worlds?
I would predict G2 for sure. I'm a little undecided on game score between 3-1 and 3-2 though, because I,
Yeah.
I feel like Misfits can definitely take a game, but especially with like, I don't know, I have more faith in Perks's performance versus H2K,
Mhm.
literally like outplaying 2v1s and stuff, and and the Lane Kingdom that he
Yeah,
wants
yeah.
everyone to call it. I don't think that Misfits
Man.
like camping mid is gonna
Can you imagine? I was just thinking about Worlds. Can you
Jack
imagine if
drifted off.
Misfits wins, right? Our Pool 1 teams are going to be Longzhu, Flash Wolves, the winner of RNG EDG, and Misfits as those four. Like, one of these things is not like the other as far as reputation goes. That'll be that just kind of shows you the jump that they've made in these last few weeks, that they even have a chance of winning this.
And playoffs matters, right? Like the regular season is very important, but if you can perform in playoffs, all that is erased, right?
Yeah.
And you have this form that you take going into Worlds, so they have an opportunity to really kind of have a big rise in their stock, to have people believe that they are this good of a team. I think if they take down G2, people think that they are legit. If they
Yeah.
get smashed by G2, I think people kind of chalk it up to them fluking their way to the finals. And for me, I think that because they play this style so heavily or focused around mid lane, I think that you can see G2 adopt that sort of strategy to play around that. And if you can neutralize PoE, if you can play that even to go even, I think that G2 generally is probably stronger around the rest of the map. I think that especially bot lane, I would still favor Sven and Mithy, who, despite the fact that Hansama has been really impressive for me, I still think that G2's bot lane is probably the best in Europe.
Yeah, I think Perks potentially perform at a high level, but then answering the question of like, was Misfits
3-1.
more impressive beating Unicorns and Fnatic, or was G2 more impressive beating Splice and H2K? Because Unicorns and Fnatic are way up there as far as reputation in Europe, and Misfits steamrolled through both of them. Based on that, I want to go Misfits.
Yeah.
Right? I really do. The camp for Power of Evil, that dude's been a top mid laner. It feels like he's just needing to be able to get his potential unlocked for so long. But then you're still up against Ven, Mithy, Perks, Trick, Expect, and all that experience in 3 straight championships.
I think Alfire is gonna be
I'm
more than
trapped.
fine versus Expect.
I'm going to go Misfits.
Okay.
It happens in the NFL. 6 seeds win the Super Bowl.
You're like, it's Europe. I'll just throw out some crazy
Yeah.
prediction.
It's
That's what I can
Misfits,
see in
baby.
his face.
It's Misfits. The fact that they're even in the finals is already crazy. They were 6 and 7 during the regular season.
Well, I'm gonna be right. I'm gonna go G2.
Yeah, I'm going with G2 as well. I would also prefer to be right.
I'm not going to bet on this one, but I will gloat if I am correct. So
You don't get to do both.
The next question is the gauntlet, right? Do we think that
Yeah.
Fnatic will actually make it out? It's going to be Fnatic, H2K, UOL, and Splice. A pretty stacked gauntlet. I do think for Europe, so it should be some very exciting games. But do you think Fnatic makes it to Worlds or not? That is the big question, I think, on most fans' minds, because this has been a team that has been so dominant, so popular in Europe for so long, and it would be kind of weird if they don't.
Yeah, I think that
It would be
Fnatic.
weird.
I think Fnatic definitely can pull it together and make it through the gauntlet.
yeah, I think they're going to have the top seed as well. It might depend on the H2K versus Fnatic third place match, but I think they have it. So they just have to win 2 best of 5s at most.
Okay, so another question we got here from Twitter. It's from Supremo, and he's asking which region looks the second best going into Worlds. This is an interesting one for me. Obviously, everyone's going to say Korea. Who do you think is the second strongest?
China. But every year I have this internal conflict.
That was. I was gonna say that's a really quick answer.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching a lot of China.
What about our boys here in North America?
Yeah, I've been beaten down by like years worth of
Don't you
results.
dare say North America is number 2.
I've been beaten down by years worth of results of North America not doing it, that I just almost have to say
Yeah.
China. And only because there's been so much upheaval in the European LCS, I'm not sold on that region, even though sometimes they have been, the second place team when they had 2 teams in the semifinals back 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Those days are gone, though. Those teams are completely different. So,
I mean, you were there for Rift Rivals, right?
and
yeah,
it,
I was
baby.
there.
Yeah. It's China.
Yeah.
Based on
I definitely do not even want to get close to saying North America.
What about
last
LMS?
year? So last year was the last year I said I was actually going to come in like super hyped to Worlds.
Yeah.
And TSM and everyone just kind of, it felt like, I don't know. The choking was the choking on the international stage. The prep never translated. All this, the work that they put in felt like there was the maximum work that teams had put in up until that point. So I was like, you know what? I'm never getting excited again until we actually have results.
But they have the same roster. They gained some experience. They were successful
he's
at
speaking
Rift
truth,
Rivals.
Kobe. Legitimately.
I would say that even though I would say maybe China's slightly ahead for second strongest string in, I would not say, hey, it's a meaningful gap at all. I think the only gap to me that matters is Korea and everybody
everybody
else. Beyond
Mhm.
that, I don't think the other gaps actually matter at all.
Right, because if we take ourselves back in time to the 2016 World Championships
Let's not do
and
that.
revisit our expectations versus reality, the expectation there was TSM top 4.
Yep.
The reality was TSM out in group stage.
Yep.
Right? The results don't necessarily mean that the expectation was 100% wrong. You can underperform, you can overperform. Your performance doesn't necessarily mean what you would do 10 times out of 10. So
Mhm.
I think in a world where you play that out a lot of times, I think semifinals was too ambitious of a prediction. I think that would very rarely happen. And I think groups is all like TSM getting knocked out of groups is also a fairly rare outcome based on how good they were coming in and the fact that they were one game away and very close games at that to being able to make it out of groups. I think quarterfinals for 1 to 2 teams is a very realistic expectation for NA, but I think China's a little higher than that.
I also think that this year, overall, the overall package that North America will be sending to Worlds is going to be stronger.
Yeah, we already know 2 teams.
Yeah, exactly. Regardless of who the
The
third
Worlds
team
looks good.
is, I think that all 3 are going to be fairly capable. And even though this year we don't have a first seed or first round
We have a
or
first
whatever,
seed. They will just not be in
yeah, we don't have a pool 1 team or whatever. It actually doesn't. I don't think that,
That means
negatively affects it too
no,
much.
you can still be in the same group as SKT.
Yeah.
So that's unlucky.
Which is.
Do you want to do NA finals now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, because we got a whole the winner matters for NA legacy, but as we mentioned, like Worlds groups, they're both going to be just thrown in there into pool 2 and drawn into random groups. But TSM versus Immortals, hype.
It is
What
actually
do you
going to
got?
be super hype. I got early game for you coming at you from Immortals. Smithy and Olay were on display with some extremely quick playmaking, roaming together from very early on in the game. So I want to see how TSM react to that specifically. Other than that, I do kind of have a lot of confidence in TSM, and I'm very intrigued by the recent Biofrost interview where he said there's definitely going to be cheese in the finals. So now I'm a little interested for what the curveball is going to be, because TSM I thought had a pretty interesting draft where they were able to manipulate a Talia early pick and then pick Cassidy into it for the counter. I would want to see some more extreme cheese than that, because that to me is just pretty
That's my
run of the
question
mill.
is what is he considering cheese, right? Is Relic Shield and Cleanse on your AD carry with heal and support, is that cheese, right? Is it, something crazy like Leona Draven or something? Is that cheese?
Yeah.
What is the level that is considered cheese? Because for some people, they consider anything that's slightly off meta to be a cheesy pick. So I am very excited about it though. And if Cody-san and Olay think that they are, underdogs in the spot lane, maybe they'll try to come up with something.
I have a little interesting tidbit about scrims
Okay.
coming up. So I was suspicious that TSM and Immortals had been scrimming each other because they seemed to both have this unrealistically high priority on Kog'Maw. No one else was doing it. Confirmed. They actually had been scrimming Immortals a fair bit, but that's obviously going to go away now that it's the week of the finals. And before then, they actually scrimmed Immortals almost never during the regular season because scrim culture in NA ended up getting more organized this year. And certain teams were booking scrims 2 months out. They would just book 2 months of scrims so they'd always have a scrim partner. But what that meant for TSM was that they didn't book scrims with Immortals early on because they didn't think they'd be very good because they're the 7th place team early on. And then when they were good, they were already all booked up. So they weren't able to scrim until playoffs. So the matchups that these guys have played against each other is actually fairly limited to just recently. And I think that can potentially make the matchup even more exciting if they're not very used to each other.
Yeah, it will be pretty interesting. One of the questions I've been seeing, talking about Kog'Maw, is what do you guys think are going to be the highest priority champions for the NA finals? Kog'Maw, very likely one of them. What else?
It depends on the bans, right? Because if they're leaving Callista Tristana in draft phase, then I don't think Kog'Maw is super high priority. From there, I am very, very curious if Immortals just bans Rakan, because that's a pick that was super high priority in Korea, has been high priority in the LPL. But when you look at Ole's champion pool, it's almost absent of Rakan. And even now, when I watch him play it on solo queue, he doesn't actually seem that good on the pick, even though it feels like it should fit him. That's one that wouldn't even be a contested pick. Those are the things that come to mind right off the bat. What do you got?
Yeah, exactly. I think that Olay actually has so many options that maybe the Rakan won't hurt him too much. if he doesn't even like value it that high or incorporate it. So I don't know if that is going to be like a pivotal one for the match.
Yeah.
I'm actually really concerned about the mid lane champion pool
Mhm.
because Bjergsen versus Pobelter has typically just been so Bjergsen's kind of one sided that if the mid lane champion pool kind of is whittled down and TSM can actually manipulate it for even counter picks like we've been seeing. You can't blind pick Talia anymore after her nerfs.
Hmm.
A lot of these mid lane nerfs have been pretty significant as far as actually trying to get counter picks and people who do play Kassadin and things like that. And Lucian is that's why Lucian's getting blind picked more because
Hmm.
the blind picks are actually getting so much more scarce. I think the mid lane champion pool is probably going to be area to focus.
Yeah, that's a good point. What I'm really interested in is if anyone else is going to kind of pick up some new mid lane champions. Like we saw Huhi playing a fair bit of Vel'Koz and actually looking pretty damn good on it.
Hmm.
Vel'Koz works pretty well in Cassio, which is actually the highest presence mid laner right
I
now.
mean, Bjergsen played Xerath.
Yeah, so I mean, some of these things could be curveballs like that could come into finals, which would be very, very interesting because there are these champions, like you said, like Caston, like Vel'Koz, like some of these guys that are on the fringe in NA meta and aren't really played much or are only played by specific people, but could be very effective into some of these picks. So
Hmm.
I think that teams could be rewarded very heavily for specifically prepping new champions that are good matchups in this meta.
Yeah.
Which may be what Biofrost was kind of alluding
Alluding
to.
to,
Referring
yeah.
to.
Even though cheese is super overused,
Yeah.
that's kind of the idea.
Looking at the role by role switch is another thing that like makes this series so interesting to me because if we look at performance right now, like who has the better player in each role? Support, I think Ole is favored over Biofrost.
Mhm.
AD, Double is favored over Cody Sun.
Mhm.
Instantly makes the bottom lane super entertaining, right? Mid lane, I think, is favored Bjergsen. Jungle is favored Xmithy. And then top lane, between Haunter and Flame, they were what, 1 point different from each other in all LCS voting. So you now have 2 for 2 as favored and not favored, and one that is tied. Like, it can't feel more close than that. They were both 14-4 match score during the regular season.
Yeah, I guess the arguments then just come down to, hey, where are the biggest gaps, right? Because Doublelift, people are going to probably prioritize him over Cody Sun, but Cody Sun's pretty damn good, right? Like
Mhm.
he's up there. I don't think that that's a big downgrade. Is Smithy as much better than Svenskeren as Bjergsen is over Pobelter? That's like the big question to me because
Mhm.
most people would say Bjergsen in a heartbeat, right? And they would favor Bjergsen pretty heavily, as Kobe was saying. Bjergsen generally smashes Pobelter in these sorts of series. So is Smithy enough of a difference if bot lane and top lane is pretty even?
Yeah, and also looking at the general flow of the meta, we're seeing a lot of playmaking supports and a lot of playmaking junglers. And the playmaking advantage then would fall over to Immortals because those are two positions where they would have the advantage, meaning Svenskeren and Biofrost have to perform at like a very high level for them to be able to get the jump on Immortals in these fights. Which, based on that, you would almost want to favor Immortals.
Yeah.
What do you got?
I was just looking at specifically the top lane because this to me is one of the closest. Like you're
Okay.
going, lane by lane.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, when they talk about this top lane matchup specifically, always kind of revert to Haunter like having a bit more diversity in his champion pool. But I kind of want to bring up the question of how is that an actual big issue, even with how the draft phase is going right now? If we're talking about, oh, there's gonna be so much focus on mid lane, and a lot of mid lane bans are trying to get those counter picks, and then you have the big playmaking supports as well. Even if Flame has the majority of his games on like 3 champions, Jarvan, Renekton, and Shen,
Hmm.
and then he even throws a couple Gnar games in there, I feel like that's enough for top lane.
Yeah.
Even
Yep.
though people are like, yeah, you only play like a couple champions in top lane, you don't need to in the meta right now. And those are the premier top laners. So I actually don't think the champion pool thing is going to affect it.
Yeah, I don't think it affects it that much as long as you do have a respectable proficiency on your Cho'Gaths and your Maokais and these sorts of
Mhm.
champions. If they target ban you and there's like 4 bans thrown at top lane and then you're just playing Maokai fine, it's like your bans were all wasted, right? These are not champions that I think that are super, super exploitable unless a team is willing to fully commit to a carry style top laner, a la Khan, right? You play a Jace or something, you
Mhm.
absolutely slam this where you're camping it. I don't think that these teams are likely to play that sort of style. So I don't think that the top lane champion pools can be exploited like that.
So who's gonna win?
I think TSM still because I just think that to me, the question of is Smithy enough better than is Smithy
Yeah,
enough
3 in a
better than
row.
Sven?
Yeah.
I don't think he is that much better than Sven, where I do think Bjergsen is that much better than Pobelter. I may be proven wrong because I think that there is still the playmaking ability from
Mhm.
Immortals, and they have the ability to actually make this a very competitive series. I think this would be a 3-2, and I could see it going either way. But to me, it's still Bjergsen. He's the biggest difference maker across the map in this series.
He's definitely going to need to be in a finals game, right? And that's
Mhm.
usually where we talk about clutch plays
Mhm.
and we talk about high performance players. You know, if you're in the finals, that's when people will talk about you need to pass me the ball, right?
Yeah.
Need to be the one who wants to take the shot and create plays. And I do think that he's up to the task.
Yeah, I think it's either an Immortals 3-0 or a close TSM win, but I think it's
Whoa.
going to be a close TSM win,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
So you think break this down for me. So
Yeah.
why will Immortals smash them if they're going to win?
Because of the experience of TSM and the clutch performances we're talking about. I think if this series gets into an incredibly clutch moment, TSM will overperform. So it's a challenge of getting them there. So I think in a close series, they win. And I think if Immortals is to win, it's because they hit him in the mouth right away. The jungle support playmaking meta is super effective, and they smash him 3 games in a row. But I think the close series is more likely based on the matchup, and TSM will take it.
Okay.
Seems like a weird way to get 2 bets in there.
Yeah. What's going to happen
But
is
he managed.
Immortals will win in
I
a
think
close
he
series,
pulled it off.
and I'll be super.
He did. He
He
got
did
got
pull
to
it
there
off.
pretty well done. Well
There you
done.
go. But I kind of am curious to hear your opinion, Kobe, on how big of a difference do you think it is between these two junglers? Or do you think there's one at all?
I do think there is a difference. I mean,
Give you a grading system. If the better jungler is a 10, what is Svenskeren?
so here's the thing. I wouldn't want to separate them individual. I think a big part of jungling right now is how you're working with other people. And one of your main partners early on is a support. So that's where a lot of the extra points for Smithy come through. I just think that they work so closely together and so quickly. Like we'll group up for roaming, we'll group up for deep wards, and the way that Immortals other players will move into the jungle to ward
Mhm.
in the jungle. This, does benefit Smithy, and it's not something that he's specifically doing. Maybe, he is a big part of the communication
Mhm.
and all that. You can contribute to that. But I feel like there are a lot of these other factors that also add on to. I feel like Smithy is slightly better right now. It's been a while since we've had this Svenskeren, blind invades from
Yeah.
MSI and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
that was a long time.
So I feel like the flame for him has definitely died down.
Mhm.
I think that Sven is actually performing at a pretty good level. But again, I feel like it's all these other factors of working super well with the rest of the team and
Yeah.
the extra information.
But to
for Smithy.
simplify it, if Smithy's a 10, Svenskeren is I have him as an 8.
So you think he's
So I don't think there's this huge gap,
okay?
basically.
Yeah, I mean, is that a huge gap? Like 2 points out of 10 seems like pretty.
Seems
decent.
fine.
20%
Seems-
less.
20%
Yeah.
more effective.
20% is a.
You
And
just- the whole package
duo?
you just talked
So if you
about.
want to use that grading,
The whole package you just
what
talked
about the
I feel like it would
jungle?
be even less. I might
Yeah.
I might give it a 10% difference.
So
Okay.
you put Svenskeren a 9 and Smithy a 10.
It feels weird with your numbers because it feels like you're saying that it's perfect and it's slightly below perfect.
Well,
but
that's you put the better one at perfect. So then it's just an easy system.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go
Alright.
10% difference.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So a question we got here from Twitter, Brian Fernandez is asking, how do you think Immortals will perform for Worlds 2017 since they're locked in? They have never been to an international tournament. That's a good question.
Again,
Yes,
for
it
me,
is.
the question always comes back to the mid lane. And I've known Pobelter for like 6 years. I love him to death. I am worried what it's going to look like on the international stage. If you look at the mid laners that are already qualified for Worlds,
BDE, Faker, Xiaohu, etc.
Even Scout's pretty good.
you guys, good list, guys.
Yeah.
But it really is kind of.
PoE perks,
This
etc.
is exactly. It's a long list of impressive mid laners. So that's where my question always comes back to. I think that the team play from Immortals is definitely outstanding. So I think that they will do well. And whether they actually get super far is going to be determined by POB's performance, and how he steps up. He says he wants to prove himself to be, one of the greats.
Yeah.
North American mid laner here, one of the few. He's
The few, the proud.
kind of fighting against so
The
many, but
non-import mid laners.
yeah, non-import mid
Mhm.
laner here in North America. So I'm very much looking forward to see what he can do internationally.
So I will set doing well as making it out of groups.
That's why. Oh, I didn't contextualize.
so
For
I'm-
North America, I
and
always have
it-
doing well, getting out of groups.
It
Yeah.
depends on the group. It so
It
depends
does.
on the group. The variance in those draws, man, is huge.
And I think as far as a good performance being getting out of groups, I think Immortals can do well. I think Immortals can get out of groups, and I think that they would have to play well, and a lot of it is going to come down to can your team play shine through if you're outmatched enough individually, as you're kind of alluding to with Pobelter. And that I think is something that remains to be seen, and it's based on group draw as well. But
Mhm.
I do think it's a realistic expectation for TSM and Immortals to have a shot at getting out of groups. Like they should, I think, be able to get out of groups.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to obviously be answered in the future, but like,
Yep.
it is possible now to have a group with Misfits as your pool 1, Gigabyte Marines as your other pool 2, and then like another minor region as your pool 3, and you get drawn into that group. Like
Let's go.
I feel like almost any pool 2 team in that situation has a good chance of getting out of the group if they get something like that. Like there's a good chance it's more balanced. 3 of the 4 things are going to have Korean teams in them. You're going to have top LPL teams. Like you're going to have Flash Wolves and AHQ and their 3rd seed in there. Hong Kong Attitude, I think, is the 3rd team from the LMS that will have to make it in through the play-in. So that group draw is going to be pretty hype.
Yeah, it is going to be pretty crazy. Let's talk a little bit about the gauntlet, though. A lot of people are pretty excited for the gauntlet. We don't know exactly the seeding for it yet because CLG versus Dignitas is going to determine who is the higher seed, but C9 is waiting in the finals.
Yeah.
FlyQuest is waiting in the lowest match.
Boom. And then the winner of the 3rd place match gets the 2nd seed versus the 3rd seed.
Yeah.
So
there's been a lot of questions about, can FlyQuest do it?
no.
No.
I
Kobe,
do not think so.
I'm not going to go to the FlyQuest hater. I'm going to go to you.
Would you like to bet about this, Kobe? I will take a bet.
No. You mean win the final? I mean win the gauntlet?
Worlds, yes.
Yeah, no. I wouldn't bet on it. And they
No
definitely
reverse sweeps?
they definitely have their work cut out for them. Because look at the people who are going to be, in the gauntlet. Smoothie's already promised that Cloud9 will be the victors there, and they are definitely going to be a very difficult opponent. They're waiting there as like the final boss, right? But even to get to that point, it's going to be a struggle. I did already recommend that they try out Jungle Rammus because
Rammus is a really good
people
jungle,
have been
man.
kind of asking for some tips. I feel like he's super good right now.
Contracts is like, Kobe, what should I do?
No, Contracts didn't ask me.
He's-
He doesn't give a shit what I think. He's like, hey, get out of here, you little scrub. But I do think that they're kind of like Bifrost is saying, there are some curveballs that you can throw right now. The problem with betting on FlyQuest would be that they would have to make it using curveballs like all the way up, right? And even though everyone will be like, yeah, I did it before, that's why we were so like surprised by that and why it was such a miracle for them at the time.
Yeah.
It's extremely unlikely for any team that starts at the bottom to make it all the way.
I also think that C9 team was better than this FlyQuest team. This FlyQuest team has not looked strong this split at all, really. They barely avoided relegation tournament, really. So I don't see them going that far. But it is a very interesting discussion, at least among the 3 teams. When you're thinking of CLG, Dig, C9, these are 3 teams that are looking pretty strong, or at least with CLG historically have been looking pretty strong. To me, they feel like the odd man out right now because the last 2 series, because the last 2 series that they have shown were not impressive. And I think that makes it really hard for me to favor them unless they show something amazing in the 3rd place match against Dignitas. I'm expecting them to lose there. I'm expecting them to lose in the gauntlet.
Yeah, I mean, I think the finals is going to be between Dig and C9. And even though we've seen that series before, right? And it was incredibly close with a 3 inhib comeback in game 4 to prevent the game 5. So just trying to like gut check who would win that one. I still think C9 would be very slightly favored. It really depends on
that's
how
that C9
much,
bias.
That's C9 bias. Kick it in one more time. Can't give a prediction without being biased. But I think that series was so close. And if you play that series 10 times, I think C9 wins 6 of them. Like games 1 and 2, the Dig won in that series were incredibly close. Game 4 was actually something that I think should have been a C9 win. 15 times out of 16 as an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
And then it should have been a game 5. So I think C9 will recover from that and go to Worlds.
Man, that is going to be such a difficult one.
That's so hard to predict.
Yeah, because Dig have been looking.
And you don't want to
good,
look like
too.
you're biased towards C9, so you don't want to predict them.
No, we don't actually care about that. It's. Are we actually going to do the prediction for this one? Because that's tough.
It's so far in the future, too. Like, we don't even know seeding at this
Yeah.
point. Like, it's speculation. We'll be doing another episode before then where we can really get into the nitty gritty. So, no
Yeah, we
need.
don't have to go too much
Yeah.
more on that, but it is going to be very exciting, and I do think that the third place match will give us a lot of insight into our expectations, I think, for the gauntlet. Because if Dignitas comes into this and crushes
Yeah.
in third place match,
Mhm.
then I think you maybe have higher expectations for them
Yeah.
against C9, perhaps.
With all that aside, as we're pretty much kind of wrapped up on our main like finals prediction discussion, I'll go to another Twitter question here that says, which team would best improve NA chances as a third seed? This is from Christian Castillo or XGN073. So this isn't like who do we think could make it?
Yeah.
It's
Who would
they
be better
qualify,
internationally?
then they get 2 weeks to prepare for the play-in stage, and who would do best in that environment?
I think C9 for now. They're the team that has international experience. You know, we talk about NA's failure at Worlds last year. They still made it out of groups, right? This is a team that has made it out of groups a couple times. This is a team that has had a relatively stable roster with quite a bit of experience. I think that that's a team that can perform at whatever level they're showing internationally, right? You know, they're not going to win Worlds, but if they come out very strong from the gauntlet, they can show that same form at Worlds. I think that they are not going to be affected by the nerves.
Yeah, I think a lot of it does have to do with the international experience, and there's a reason that we value, having been to Worlds and having
Mhm.
that so highly is because we so often see people perform so differently at Worlds than they did, even if they were crushing in the finals of their home region, and that's where a lot of the expectations tend to get shattered. So having a bunch of guys that have already been there, I think actually does go a long way.
Yeah. Playing at Worlds is a totally different experience than playing domestically. The fact that you have to prepare for these guys from all these different regions and metas. And in the second day of group stage, you're playing 3 different teams on the same day. So that is something with experience matters. With that, though, I think send in your final Twitter questions now. Hashtag the dive law. The producers will give us the best ones. And in the meantime, how's solo queue going?
Solo queue's going pretty well. I've been playing some kind of more fun stuff. There's this build that I love for Vigar whenever I play ARAMs, and I play a
Oh
lot
my
of
goodness.
ARAMs. And this build, I want more people to try it out.
Yeah,
I want to see if
tank
it's
Veigar.
actually good. So in ARAM, my thought process was always, well, you just get a lot. It's so easy to stack your AP because you're hitting all these people with your Qs and your Ws that, well, you could just build tanky. So I'd always go Morello, Spirit Visage, Warmogs. I took this into some solo queue games. I was playing with Flowers. We won all 3. So
Some solo queue games with Flowers. Normal game?
yes, some normal games.
That's not solo queue.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But so I was playing on Summoner's Rift, and
Summoner's Rift
I was playing some
games.
Summoner's Rift
Yes.
games of this tank
Those
Vigar.
count as bot co-op AIs as well.
As cover
like-
AIs.
yeah.
Okay.
With
Well, we're
Flowers.
playing as diamond players.
Okay.
And it actually seems pretty reasonable to me, and it's pretty fun to play.
Yeah.
Because when you're playing against these AP matchups,
Mhm.
it's actually so hard for them to kill you at all.
Yeah.
And you have 45% CDR. You can actually stack up a hilarious amount of AP with your passive. This is just kind of like a for fun build that I wanted to try and see if it works. And I'm probably going to keep playing it until I lose at least, or until I discover that,
Yeah.
okay, it's actually terrible.
We want you to play ranked.
I would. Yeah. I
With
would
that
tell.
build,
where
with
this
that
gets you.
build, okay.
Yeah.
I would
Then we
tell
can
the
talk.
viewers the same thing that I always tell Azael when he comes to me with these things. Because Azael will mostly play a bunch of ARAMs, and then
Yeah,
every
play
once in
normals,
then
play
every
some
once in a
ranked,
while he'll play a couple Summer Rift games, and every single time he absolutely crushes because he's like a better player than his Summoner's Rift ELO is sitting
Mhm.
at. So then he comes and he's like, "Oh yeah, I crushed him with Garen with full lethality or something," and I'm like,
I was the best player in the game, and I did well.
"You want to keep
This is
playing a
really
couple
sick.
more to get to your regular rating there, buddy,
Yeah.
before you."
Fun builds are fun, Kobe.
That's true.
I
that's
will
true.
say that your non-AP Nasus and ARAM is way better than AP Nasus
go.
and ARAM. Like just building a shield
got all the
first,
ARAM
stacking up your
strats.
CDR,
Yeah.
because you get like 12 Q damage on a cannon because it's all accelerated on
Yeah, yeah.
ARAM. Totally worth it and better. And you can't kite on ARAM because of snowball.
Mhm.
So the ARAM builds I respect.
I was also
Transferring
playing
mode.
some Rank Mundo jungle, which actually does seem pretty strong to me.
Yeah.
That I actually am pretty convinced, and maybe it's not better than some of the other tank junglers like Cho'Gath and whatnot, but I've been seeing those get banned pretty much nonstop.
Yeah.
And I've been doing the clear that Jet was showing me, just the Raptor start. You do 3-camp clear immediately base, and you get it back on the map. And you do pretty much stay full health from then on. And even his dueling with challenging smite feels
Really good.
respectable. So it's like Mundo, as far as like a more serious thing in ranked, feels pretty strong.
Yeah, he's super
You're also
fit.
an experienced Mundo player.
I like
So
Mundo.
that definitely lands.
That's true. So what you been playing, Kobe?
For my Smurf account, Kane only.
Okay.
But that's only on my Smurf account.
Yeah.
On my main account, when I'm trying to grind ELO, I've been grinding Jarvan, Rammus, and Warwick. And it's not that exciting anymore because I put a lot of time already on those champions. I am building Jarvan, the tank version, as is most common.
Knight's Vow.
No.
No, you go Cinderhulk into what?
I don't go full LCS tank mode
yeah.
because I still need to kill people. So
Okay.
I at least get a Black Cleaver in there.
Okay, Cinderhulk.
If I'm doing pure tank, then I'm picking Rammus anyway. And I'm banning Trundle, by the way. If you're gonna play these tanks, ban Trundle. He absolutely super smashes, hard counters Rammus in every single way. You can put up a pillar, it instantly stops Powerball, so then you're stuck, you can't do anything. Plus, he will shred you whenever you put on your defensive ball curl.
Yeah.
So if you're planning on playing that, I would say definitely ban the Trundle.
Yeah, and that takes you in a negative MR and armor after your ball curl runs off as well, because it steals a percentage. It smashes you.
It's terrible.
One Twitter question that speaks to my solo queue was Orn Pinions from the AP Wizard Lizard. Or at L's Callum. But we talked about a little bit about this, and I don't want to get too negative on Orin because a pre-release champion, like a new champion, you don't want to make him OP. You want to make sure the skill curve is there, and there's a lot of new mechanics on this guy that could be really weird.
Okay, now Flame with some good jokes. Let's go.
Man, he's meant to be this champion that stays out on the map, and his recommended item is a corrupting potion that you have to go back to base to refill. That's problem one. Problem two is he has these giant items that are super upgrades that really are only 100% gold efficient. Pretty much any other tier 3 upgrade is more than 100% gold efficient. So the only ever good buy is at like 4 or 5 items, yet like it's this cool new thing that's plastered on everyone's build. So of course you're going to want to try them. And I personally don't like the argument of like, oh, people just need to learn to not build these cool looking items we put in the game. Make the cool looking items like good items that are fun to interact with. I think he's unreliable as a kit, and his numbers are too low. Because I've had fights where I smash all of my abilities like perfectly, and they drop like 30% health, and then I have no innate tankiness, and they kill me.
Well, yeah,
Really sad.
and they also design him as like supporty, boosting crowd control and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you still need to have that base level
Yeah.
of effectiveness.
With all that, I like the kit. So like when he does get buffed, I'm still going to play.
And he has cool mechanics.
Yeah. Exactly. The pillar thing, I actually like the fact that it's not loud because you need people to forget about it in team fights so you can slam into it to get the knockups done. But I will like this champion a lot more if they change the items to like competing with stuff like Righteous Glory or Infinity Edge Rush or something like that.
Yeah. Right now, I feel like if you're gonna play Ornn, you have to like enter the game and tell your team a PSA. Hey guys, don't buy these items until you're full efficiency already.
And people hate you if you play Ornn right now, which is like one of the bigger problems. Is just the negativity around him in the community. I think he is bad, but I had an Honor 5 player flame me in a game. And after he was flaming me, I was just like, I remember he was Honor 5. I said, how are you Honor 5? And he's like, because I haven't had to play with many Orns. I'm like, damn, he really hates me.
Before you said shitty Orns.
Oh,
Yeah,
I like that part.
We had the question, who is going to be the one to swear on the episode?
Yeah.
Kobe is the
twice.
winner. There you go.
But I was just quoting Jack.
Okay. So maybe it's like you each get half a swear.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny. I've been having some similar experiences where I actually was trying to play Ornn, and every time I would hover, my own team would ban him.
Yeah.
And so now I've realized, like you were saying, you can't tell people you're going to play Ornn. It just has to be the last minute lock in because you got to surprise your team. Otherwise, they're going to ban him away from you because everyone thinks he's so terrible. And my biggest issue with him is the wave clear. It's like his W is only current percent HP damage, so you can't actually mow down minions with this spell. At max rank, it does like half of the melee minions' health, and it's like, great, okay, well, you could use your Q and your W, but then you get all this gold from clearing the waves. You have no mana, so you have to base anyway, so his passive doesn't feel that useful because his wave clear is so bad. I just feel like he needs to be more successful in lane before anything else he does matters.
I'm 1 win away from completing the quest. Win 2 games as or against Ornn. And I learned.
I won that too really fast because he was on the other team.
Yeah, I learned it counts when the other team remakes the game. And that's the only one I got.
Oh,
Because I
no.
was playing Orn, it was like a 3-minute remake. Victory, and then it counted towards the quest. Other than that, I haven't.
That was one
gotten
of the
it yet.
funniest anecdotes. I like.
Yeah, there you go. That's how you do it. You just
That's
have to get your
Orn
teammate.
escapades. I've never played with him because the one time he got through and my team picked him, I dodged.
Yeah, see, this is why you got to surprise him.
Yeah.
Go wait till Kobe's AFK, then lock him in.
You just wait. Orn will come back with a vengeance once the buffs. We got a bunch of Twitter questions coming through. We'll try and hit a few before we wrap up the episode.
Yeah.
Do you think COG would have been better off performance-wise with Dardoch for the remainder of the split? From Not Misa.
Ooh.
I actually like that question.
Yeah, those are always so difficult to get into because a lot of the problems are very clearly the team atmosphere and what it was like working with them. CLG released multiple statements about how Dardoch didn't buy into their philosophy and how it wasn't productive for their practice atmosphere and all these things. And those are very hard for us to quantify. So even though Omar very clearly is in a learning stage and CLG is trying to train him and get to that point, and Dardoch probably would have performed better as an individual jungler on the stage, it's hard to take into account those other aspects.
Yeah, I mean, if the team doesn't want to play with him, they're not going to do well with him, right?
Yep.
And that's what it comes down to, I think, at the end of the day. I think that CLG made this swap as a long-term thing. This was a development thing. This is kind of a buy-in on Omar as a person and as a player for future. And it's hard to say that they would have done better with Dardoch even now, though, if they just didn't want to play with him.
Yeah, I tend to agree. If the team wanted to make the move, they thought, and COG always has their cap when you listen to Darshan's interviews as like winning the North American LCS or doing extremely well at Worlds. And if they were having internal turmoil, that's never going to happen. So they took it a long shot and it just hasn't worked so far. I want to loop in these two questions to talk about Ardent Sensor and tank junglers.
Okay.
Dan, CJ Please, says there's been a surge of tank junglers playing with Ardent Sensor. Thoughts? And SNC Caught Olivier says, will the Ardent Sensor Triss Kog'Maw meta be the only thing we'll see at Worlds?
Well, Ardent Sensor will be the only thing? I don't think it's going to be the only thing.
Yeah, I actually don't even think it's going to be the main thing we see at Worlds because I feel like the initiation you're gaining from these supports in this team fighting meta is in pro play better than a lot of the Ardent Sensors that have been coming through. And also, Ardent Sensor was changed on 7.17 to be a little bit worse than it is on 7.16. Basically, the level 7 values of the Ardent Sensor on 7.16 is what it's going to stop at and not scale above that, so it was nerfed.
Yeah, I think they've actually done a pretty good job of balancing it so that it won't be the only thing that we see.
Yeah.
I think it definitely still crop up, especially with a lot of the teams' Kog'Maw focus. But we've even seen the same teams that have this focus on Kog'Maw, they're willing to run a 4 diving members with a Kog'Maw in the back line with no Ardent Sensor and just playing kind of follow-up damage there as an artillery. So I definitely don't think it's mandatory.
I also think anytime the meta leans so far in one direction, you can go hard the other way as try to counteract it, right? You can do a hard engage with a very lane bully style AD carry, which is maybe what we'll see even in some of these finals, right? If someone goes Kog'Maw and Lulu and you go Blitzcrank Draven or whatever, then you can maybe kind of counteract that style of play.
That's why I think Rakan's the best support right now. Because you get to be a playmaking initiator support and build an Ardent Sensor.
Ooh.
Have your cake and eat it too.
There you go. Or you could just go Trundle and, you pillar him with the Stoneborn Pack and build an Ardent
have
Sensor.
a
No
useless
problem.
laning phase. It'll be great. Any other big questions you guys want to touch on that you see?
I think we're all good for the first ever live episode of The Dive.
I think this was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make sure that you tune in to the North American LCS Finals. That's going to be happening at the conclusion of the European LCS Finals, but most likely 12 p.m. Pacific time over in Boston. So that's going to be TSM versus Immortals. Also, all the other finals we're talking about are pretty much happening like a day or two before that with LPL or EU. So, check your esports calendar and tune into all those.
And also, tickets are still available, so you can check out lolesports.com if you haven't grabbed yours yet.
Yeah, tweet us stuff. This has been fun.
This is the time of year you can watch League of Legends all day long. That's what we will be doing, reviewing for Worlds.
All right, see you guys next week.